Ladies and gentlemen, this is Tosh Berman, and this is Tosh Talks. And today, I just finished reading a book that I like. A book called David Bowie, A Life by Dylan Jones. And here's the cover of the book. I got from the library, by the way, because I do use the library system. And as you gather, anybody who reads my blog or have watched previous Tosh Talk show, you know that I'm a huge fan of David Bowie. And I'm the type of guy who buys... There's very few artists who I buy their product or their recordings, albums, the very first day of release. But Bowie, for like the past... 40 years, I have always purchased the new Bowie record, the very first day it's released, either on vinyl or CD, or even downloading it from like Apple Music or some other online service. But most of my Bowies, I do have a hard copy of, either on CD or album. And I read various biographies of David Bowie, and since Bowie's tragic passing almost 2 years ago, there's been a series of books on him, like photography, subject books on Bowie, of course, being such a photogenic and such a visual guy who just, the presentation of David Bowie is important, but also quite a few biographies. And to be honest, a lot of the books I have read and seen are actually very, very good. He's very well represented in the book world. And David Bowie, A Life, Dylan Jones, what's the difference between the other Bowie books and this one? Well, one, this is an oral history of David Bowie. Dylan Jones didn't really write the book in a sense. It's more of an editor. And he did, I think, over 150 interviews with people who were in the Bowie world or a little bit out of the Bowie world, or sort of known people who are fans of David Bowie and so forth. And I didn't learn anything new in this book specifically. I did learn about his death more. I knew he passed away from cancer, but I didn't know what type of cancer he had. And apparently, if this book is correct, he had liver cancer. And apparently he may have, for the last decade of his life, he may not only had a heart attack, but he had a series of strokes afterwards. And, which is, just terribly tragic. But again, the way that David Bowie carried himself in the last decade of his life is, in my mind, quite heroic. And he stayed true to his vision as an artist and as a person. And on the subject matter of his view of himself as a person and as an artist, this is what the book is really about, or any biography on David Bowie. Bowie pretty much made himself into a character or a series of characters. His parents are slightly in the showbiz world. I think his mother worked in a theater as an usherette or something of that sort. And the father, I think, was an agent of some sort, or he had at least access to go see entertainment, live entertainment, and he would bring his son, David Bowie, David Jones, his real name, to these shows. So I think Bowie picked up the showbiz aspect of life at a very, very early age. And I think he's been very focused since a very young boy or teenager to make it in the music world or somewhere in the creative world. And what makes Bowie so unusual is not only his genius at doing music and stuff, but he also had an interest in doing the visual arts. He's very much a well-read person. He loved books. And so he had a singular vision to become famous. He wanted to be famous, and he wanted to be successful, and the truest showbiz mode of being successful. But it took many, many years for Bowie to reach the Ziggy Stardust stage, which he became really very famous. Probably took him about 10 years to, from the first record he made in the 60s to like Ziggy Stardust. I believe it was like a 10-year span, which is unheard of for any artist spending 10 years to break into the medium now, because everything's so instant right now. And No record label will take that long or invest in an artist to let that artist develop to a certain point. And that's a tragedy. David Bowie would not be able to exist in the year 2017, soon to be 2018, so if you're watching this 2018 as well. So Bowie, and to me, is like the last great traditional pop star. And what the book is interesting is that it's not really, there is quotes from Bowie all throughout the book, but the majority of the book is actually other people's take on David Bowie, either very close friends of his, or associates or business associates. And basically, again and again, you get a very clear picture or how Bowie conveyed himself to these people. Is that one, he's a great charmer. He knew how to speak to anybody and everybody. He was basically a shy person, but when you're shy, and I know this firsthand, you know how to present yourself as almost a performer to talk to other people. So when you're shy, you don't want to talk to anybody because you just can't. But in your mind, if you think of yourself as a character or a personality, then you can sort of face the world. And this is what Bowie has done in his past, and doing with his relationship. He was very much into, he knew the importance of charm more than anything else. He knew that whoever he works with, he had to get them to like him. And it seems like Bowie was very successful in that. I mean, he did bad things to people, of course, because he's human, and he's just human. But overall, majority of the people interviewed for this book, or past quotations from people through various presses at the time, all have a likable David Bowie view. Some of them were hurt that Bowie ignored them, but they all came to the conclusion that he was a really good guy of sorts. He also come off as being very controlling. He was very much in control of his image consistently, and he's very much of a detailed person. And he's not insane at all, even though insanity did run into his family. His mother, I think, was slightly schizophrenic. He had a brother, a half-brother by the name of Terry, who had mental illness. He was schizophrenic. And the book sort of covers, it's very interesting, this book was put together in 2017. If this book was written in the 70s, there would not be this sort of moral tone of what's right or what is wrong. Clearly, the book conveys the thought that maybe Bowie felt guilty about how he treated his brother, or his half-brother. And definitely the tone of the book, by some of the quotations, are actually kind of critical how Bowie treated his half-brother. But, you know, it's very difficult. It's easy to convey to somebody else or have an opinion on somebody how somebody treated somebody, like how they treated their parents or how they treated a family member. But the fact they're not them, they were not in that situation exactly. So they can't really, I feel that's one weak part of the book is sort of the moralization of certain aspects of Bowie's life made by other people. Because it is 2017, we are allowed to have moral judgments on people. And it's the same when I read like a biography on somebody like Frank Sinatra, who's definitely a troubled person, probably bipolar. And I cannot really comment on the moral life of somebody like that. I can admire their artistry, how a great singer, what a great artist they are, and I do separate that aspect from the personality. So like Sinatra, Bowie, I do separate whatever he is as a human being from what he presented to me as an artist. And what's important, in the end of the day, is how he presented himself as an artist to me. And the rest is just gossip, and I love gossip. And this book is very gossipy. There's a lot of sexual stuff in here, because Bowie was just totally into sex. He obviously had affairs with groupies, and a lot of the groupies were underage, which now in this book makes it sound kind of a shocking thing. But, you know, of being the same generation as David Bowie and living through the 70s music world of sorts as a viewer and going to clubs, this is a very common occurrence, the relationship between an older gentleman, rock star, and a younger girl. So I'm kind of shocked that anybody would be shocked at something like this, but that's the way it is. The book is very fair in a sense that I sense that Dylan Jones made sure everybody's voice was put in the book properly. And it's not all just about the sex life of David Bowie, but it also deals with his music and each of his albums. So you're getting a lot of information about how he made certain records, how he worked with a lot of his various producers, specifically Tony Visconti, and how he worked with somebody like Brian Eno, and how he worked for his various guitarists, including Mick Ronson. And I'm speaking to you as I figure you are already a Bowie fan watching this. But Mick Ronson was the guitarist in Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars, and a big, huge, important figure in Bowie's career and music. And the beauty of Bowie, all the biographies I read about Bowie, the one thing, people always talk about him abandoning people, taking people up, abandoning them again. I think Bowie looked at the world or his art as a canvas. And if he needed a certain color or a certain type of look, he will get that look from somebody else if he has to. And Bowie was very good, I think, putting a band together or working with other people. He immediately knew the strength of each person that he's working with, and pretty much all the musicians and all the bands that Bowie was part of or he put together were pretty great, pretty much throughout his whole career. He has made weak albums, of course. He made some terrible records. But the majority of his 40-something years of record making, it's pretty exceptional. He made a lot of great albums and a lot of great music. And again, Bowie struck me as sort of like a Duke Ellington type of character, perhaps. Somebody who could look at each musician and says, aha, you're good at this, you're good at that. And he knew how to use that person to make a sound that they collaborated on to make the record fantastic. And Bowie had that genius of recognizing other people's talents. So again, I love that aspect of the book. And then there's a big chunk of the book about his art collection, which if you watch an older Tosh Talks I did last year, I talked specifically about David Bowie's art collection in a catalog that came out a year ago. And it talks about that in the book as well. So it talks about Bowie's fascination with the visual arts. And in the 90s, he really got into art collecting at that time, and I found that really interesting because he collected a lot of obscure British artists. And usually, if you're a celebrity, you have money, you go to an art consultant, and an art consultant tells you what to buy because you're investing money into this, and they can say this painting is going to be worth so-and-so. And Bowie did hire a curator, advisor, but I don't think talking about how much money this painting is going to be worth in 2 or 10, 20 years, but more about having someone to sound off to about keeping the collection aesthetically good and focused. And Bowie is a very focused person, and I think he only talked to other people who are focused. I don't think he wasted time talking to people who don't know what they're doing. I don't think Bowie always felt he had a lot of time. I mean, he knew he was going to die eventually, didn't know he was going to die of cancer perhaps, but throughout Bowie's career, there's always a sense that Bowie was going to end somehow. From the very beginning, he did a version of Jacques Brel's My Death. And a lot of his songs have a death or an ending of sorts throughout his whole career. So something like Black Star, his last album, though everybody sees it as the last album and the last statement and the ultimate statement by him about death, to me, I don't think that's the case. When I first heard it, I thought yes, because I was totally involved in the emotional aspect of his passing that time. But the way I look at it now, I think it's just another Bowie album about his favorite subject matter, death. The fact that he was dying of cancer at the time, I don't think that affected his ability to write this record. I think he was very consistent in a sense. He didn't change his opinions that much. He learned more, he grew older, he experienced things differently, but the fact is his interests pretty much remained the same throughout his whole life. And so, if you read the other biographies of David Bowie, which I think are quite good, and you've got all the other Bowie books, that's good. Again, the unique thing about David Bowie Alive, put together by Dylan Jones, is the oral history aspect of it. So like Please Kill Me, which is a fantastic book, again, because you're hearing different voices throughout the, the narrative. This is a great book, or a very good book, I should say, of hearing different people's narratives on Bowie, although you do get the same conclusion a lot. There's nothing really shocking here. Only a few people says things are kind of negative. David Bailey, a photographer who I greatly admire, said some negative stuff about Bowie here. Nothing like personal, but just saying that he felt that that Bowie was very much of an actor, and he was very much not. He felt like a true person because he acted. And I see his point of view, and that's totally understandable. But that's what Bowie's not about. Real. Bowie's about artifice or the surface. And when you scratch the surface, you sort of learn new stuff. This is what he got from Andy Warhol, I think. And he, Bowie chose his role models quite good. He was a good reader of other artists and how they work. And he knew the strength of that, and Bowie definitely used that. So, this is a good book to get, and a good book put in the library to read. Lots of great information, very gossipy, and very enjoyable read. And it's a good book on David Bowie. And this is Tosh Talks. Thank you.